Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and this is episode 138. And I have a good friend of mine today coming in, Grace Ann. And man, I'm so thankful to have you in, Grace Ann, and just to hear who you are and to get to tell your story to, Shreveport people and to the world, because, we've met me getting my haircut. Mm-hmm. And I've been getting my haircut with you guys for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. Yeah. And Victoria, shout out to Victoria. And you just have such a great staff. Thank you. I've watched you, as a business owner, grow and have to deal with employees and people leaving and all kinds of things, even just me coming in and mm-hmm. being, a person who gets their haircut there. And I think me and you've just connected and always had, mm-hmm. Just that thing. And so getting to watch you now become Caddo commissioner and do all the things, I'm so thankful that you're here and to get to tell your story. And I hope that people enjoy it. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Clint. Absolutely. So tell me kind of your story. Where are you from originally? And then how'd you kind of get here?
So I'm born right here in Shreveport. Okay. My parents lived in Ruston. Okay. They were college students at Louisiana Tech.
How about them dogs?
And I don't know how they do it. They do that. Yeah. So my parents were students there, and they lived in Ruston. And my mom became a social worker, and she worked with a blind center. And my father became a customs agent. Shreveport was where my mom and her parents lived, and Shumpert Hospital was here. So I was born at Shumpert. And we moved to New Orleans for a few years, New York, St. Thomas, and Florida. My father's job as a custom agent, he was an infiltrator. Mm. So we moved around a lot, but Shreveport was home base in the respect that my grandfather was chief of police in the 70s. Oh, wow. And a retired FBI agent who came here in Shreveport in the late 40s. My parents were divorced when I was very young, and my mom was a single mom in Shreveport. And so just grew up in Shreveport, moving around. So it was like in and out. And if people understand the military life of what that looks like, customs, it was the same way. Mm-hmm. My dad would go do a job. We might go away and then come back. But I went to 12 schools growing up. Wow. And most of them were here. But I went to school in Virginia, lived in Herndon, Virginia, outside of D.C. And so
that's awesome.
But born and raised here, I've lived in all over Shreveport.
And so what was kind of the transition? Did you go to college here? How did you get into kind of, Avalon?
Avalon, being a salon owner, a businesswoman, a hairstylist. So I went to Magnet High School. By the time I was at Magnet, as a child, I was always behind. I struggled with reading and writing. I soared in art, the sciences. And by the time I was in high school and I was at Magnet High School, I just couldn't keep up. I loved the school and I loved my classes. The work was too much of a burden. And I went back to Huntington, which was the school that was in my district mm-hmm. that I lived in at the time. And I fell in love with woodworking when I was at Huntington.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I also fell in love with civics and free enterprise.
Okay.
And by the time I was 14 and I understood free enterprise and civics and how they work together, I knew someday I wanted to own land, I wanted to own a business, and I wanted to work in the community. Mm. I also knew through woodworking that I wanted to do something with my hands, and I loved hair and makeup. Like I was that girl that was in the bathroom making everyone's bangs as big as possible and doing their eyeliner.
That's back again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was an 80s kid and a teenager. And so, I just struggled through school, but I soared in a couple of areas. Mm-hmm. I took, not just woodworking, but I also went to Caddo Career Center and I took carpentry. I took 3rd place in cabinet making. I was in a club called VICA, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. And I was the first female to ever place in cabinet making.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's cool.
It was very cool. And I was up against college age guys. And so it was very, very cool to win that award. So
well, Jesus was a carpenter, so you're in good.
Well, there you
company.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. So I went to college. I went to LSUS. I think a lot of people, I don't want to say it was like the generation where everybody said go to college, but the truth is you're at an age where you don't know really what you want to do or really how to get there. And that's just for every generation.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely I didn't know what to do or where to get there. And I went to LSUS, and I went to LSUS for almost 2 years. My mom was diagnosed with lung cancer when I was 18 years old, and I was in my first year. I graduated high school when I was 17. I was in my first year of college. I also was married very, very young, and I was married. And I watched my mom die at the age of 48. She might have been 49 by the time she passed. But that year process really taught me that life is short, it's precious, and it's important that we live authentically, and we follow our heart, and we really get close and listen to what matters. And seeing my mom pass away, having not done the things that she wanted to do, she lived a very sad life. She was a counselor for displaced homemakers. Like I said earlier, she's a social worker. And she went on to be a founding person of a program in the state of Louisiana to help women find income and sustainable life after their spouse has left them or abused them, and to take care of themselves and their family. She herself was a victim who wasn't taking care of herself, but teaching others to take care of themselves.
There's a lot of that going on.
A lot of that going on. And so I saw her, to me at the time, she was an old woman. Now I'm much older than she was when she passed. But, I thought, wow, she didn't live her dreams. She helped people, and she was a kind mom, but she lived a lot of closet issues. And I believe her sadness and her hurt is what ate away at her physically and emotionally, and why she ended up with cancer. So when she passed, I remember telling her right before she passed that I would be happy, and that I promised her that I would have a career and I would financially take care of myself. She was so concerned that I would be reliant upon somebody who wouldn't care for me. And I think she saw that I was down not a healthy path, and she didn't know what to do to help me at this point. And so I just remember promising her I was going to be okay. And, don't want to get emotional, but
it's okay.
She would be happy. And she would be happy that my whole life is truly dedicated for the purpose of giving back because of what she went through. And so I really am very authentic when it comes to my daily life and trying to help others have a functioning life, that they're thriving and that is fulfilled.
Yeah, I know, to kind of skip a little bit, you've had me come in several times to Avalon and love on the ladies and talk to them. And that's something that I think sets you apart in your care for the people that are there and the women that are there, seeing you handle them and heard the stories of, you want them to thrive.
Correct.
They're coming in bad situations, and you're giving them opportunity to grow and holding them accountable. And I've heard, those things. And so, you're doing that in a way that, would make your mom proud.
Thank you. When she passed away, it was pretty sudden that I went to my grandparents and I said, I need to sit down with y'all. My grandparents were the people in my life that were grounded, that I could go to and trust.
These your mom's parents?
Yes. My mother's father and mom. My father was abusive. My stepfather was abusive. And my mom was an enabler. And so they were always just such important role models to me. And I went to them and I said, I need to tell y'all I'm about to make some very serious life changes. So I would have been 19 and a half at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, at this point, was God in that? Were you in church? Like, what?
Yeah, so I've always actually been in church. I was raised Southern Baptist and Lutheran. Mm-hmm. So I say all the time I'm thoroughly confused on how to worship. I found the simple church as an adult, and that's helped me a lot. Mm-hmm. But I love church. Like, I just love worship. And I have a relationship, and I always have. I'm a questioner. So I'm that doubting Christian, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm always like, are you there, God? It's me, Grace Ann.
Yeah,
are you really there? I need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Can you show up? I need to see you. I need to touch you. So God was in my life. I was definitely struggling with seeing my mom pass. There's so much to my life story that I'm skipping to get to this point of me being a business owner and helping people. But there was a lot of serious abuse as a child. Mm-hmm. And so I was at a point when she was diagnosed with cancer that I was trying to find a voice in a lovingly way to say, I love you, Mom, but I have to be okay. And what's happened in our family is not okay. And I was also at a point where I was trying to find that relationship with God, that why was God allowing things to happen? Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's like one of the number one questions, like, why would God allow X, Y, Z to happen? And so I was just at a very pivotal point in my life. And I went to my grandparents and I said, I am dropping out of college and I'm getting divorced. Mm. And I remember my grandmother saying, we need to pray. And I said, we do need to pray, and I'll pray, but I need you to hear me. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather, who was and to this day, the strongest, loving Christian person I've ever met, said, talk to me. Tell me what's going on. And I never will forget that, because he wanted to hear me before there was judgment.
That's good.
And that's huge.
Well, yeah. And that's what, part of our problem as we, grow and we have pain and we have suffering, sometimes the church can spiritual bypass, yes. They can just say, hey, the Bible says this, do this, or this is wrong, instead of like having a conversation. I was telling one of my counselors this morning, he was meeting with a lady who, has been being abused for months and years, and she wants to do the right thing. And she's like, what is God's? And it's like, it's not so easy and not so black and white to just be like,
right.
Well, God hates marriage, so stay married. It's like, you got to figure this stuff out. And so it's beautiful that your grandfather model Christ and let you kind of tell your version of the story and hear you and see you.
And I will just say in that there are a lot of choices that I made until their death that he might not agree with, but he listened to me. And he really gave me good counsel, even in times when I was still not making good choices. Mm-hmm. And that's another great life lesson that, I try to remember. I do a lot of, okay, what would Jesus do? What would Grandpa do? Mm-hmm. So then when that happened, my grandpa said, well, what is it that you want to do? And I said, I want to be a hairstylist, and I don't know how to do that. So we went to Harold the barber, and Harold said, go to barber school. And I walked into barber school about a month later. And when
you were how old then?
I was 19,
wow.
Maybe 20. I think I might have turned 20 at this point, because there was a little moment where I had to wait for an opening to go when I started school. So I think I was 20. But I walked in, and when I'm telling you, I knew I was there with angels, and I knew this. And a lot of people know the phrase, the aha moment, because she would have these moments and she would share, this was my aha moment. I had a moment where I knew this is where God wanted me. Mm-hmm. And I have no way to tell you how that felt, what it looked like, what it smelled like. And I say what it smelled like. I mean, I'm an artist, and so I'm very driven by sounds like that. artwork behind you. I can't function because the colors are, but I was so overwhelmed with this beautiful comfort when I walked into Votech Barber School in North Market. I knew I was where I was meant to be. And I promised God in that moment I would always give back if he helped me in this process. I mean, I was scared out of my mind. I was newly divorced. I was so young. My mom was gone. I had no real relationship with my father. My grandparents were there for me, but I was at that age where I was like pushing back from any help. Mm-hmm. I am a woman. I've got this. Don't tell me what to do. Don't,
Well, I'm sure you were kind of fighting, the promise you made to your mom. Mm-hmm. And probably, I mean, I'm sure you'll get here, but it's like, we all have that independence and we think, oh, well, that means doing it on our own.
Sure. That might still be a problem.
Well, I mean, our strengths are going to be our strengths and our weaknesses are always going to be our weakness. The good news is, my wife laughs about this all the time. I'm like, well, at least it's nothing new that I'm doing that's dumb. It's just the same stuff I've been working on for 20 years.
Right.
So, okay, so you go into barber school and that kind of transitioned you into
Yeah. So I had a little apartment and I worked 2 jobs. Worked at Johnny's Pizza, and my uncle owned a restaurant, and I worked there. And from the first head that I touched, like it just was natural. Mm-hmm. I was nervous about how do you do this? Like, how do I hold the scissors? How do I stand? How do I know what I'm going to do? But every minute in the barber program, it was just like the information just came to me, mm-hmm. and I accepted it, and it was very natural to me.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, that's how, my job feels to me.
I love that.
And even though it's hard, it's like, I'm sure you've been doing it for how long?
33 years.
Right. So, I've been doing counseling for 16, and, there's times where I get in a space where it's almost like music's playing.
Sure.
Where you're just in that zone because you know what you're doing and how to do it, and the Holy Spirit's moving, and there's connection, and we talked about this before, but like therapy, that there's another side to cutting hair that's also loving on people,
and that comes natural too. And so there was something that happened in the school where I connected with the clients that were coming into the school, that touching their life, I realized was more than the haircut. Mm-hmm. And Votech at the time, it's now Northwest Louisiana Technical College. And we would have 30 to 40 people lined up a day to get a haircut. And they were people from prisons, homes for people that had emotional issues, homeless people. So there were all these different walks of life coming in. And when you would
who were all pretty desperate.
Who were desperate. And when you and then there were also people that were like, I just want to help you out. So we were seeing all walks of life. But the moment that you would touch somebody, you could see like a relaxation or a uptight. You could see the physical instant emotion. Mm-hmm. And because of the abuse that I suffered growing up, I had to do a lot of therapy for good touch and healthy touch and to be well. And I realized that people were vulnerable the moment they sat in the chair. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to help people to feel not vulnerable, but to feel safe, and to know that I just wanted to help them feel powerful in their appearance.
Yeah.
So my motto for Avalon, and it's on my wall in my salon, it's like, I'm here to help everyone we care for to feel beautiful, capable, and strong. I can't remember it right in this moment because we're talking, but I really got this moment that I'm here to help people feel capable, and that I had an opportunity to love on somebody. Mm-hmm. And before I even knew I was loving on somebody, like it was just this like natural ability. And I think it goes back to this moment when I went into the school and I felt God's presence, and I said, help me, and I will always give back. And so I believe we all have different talents and we have different abilities, and they're spiritual, like God gives them to us. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this is a real true belief that I found my talents. And when my mom was dying, she had lung cancer that spread to her brain. And there was something that happened, I have chills telling you this, when they knew that everything was inoperable, I would just go and put hands on her and it would calm her. And it wasn't like I was special, but God was special. Mm-hmm. God was using me to help comfort her.
Well, yeah, but that's the mystery of humanity, right? Is that in our theology is that we are made in God's image, mm-hmm. And so before mm-hmm. sin, our bodies were good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we have this weird cultural thing where we kind of can hyper spiritualize things and think the only thing that's good about us is the spirit. But there's something unique and special about humanity that's set apart from all other things that we bear the image of God. Mm-hmm. So in our physical connection and in touching and in being in relationship, God is present in a way that he can't be in. I mean, he could if he wanted to, but he's not in all these other options. And so when you say we have these different personalities, like, yeah, that's what the body of Christ is. Mm-hmm. Is that some of us are thumbs and some of us mm-hmm. are mouths and some of us are feet and some of us are pains in the butt and some of us, right. We're all different body parts. And when you find your space where you're really thriving in the imago Dei that you are, where you're doing the thing you're supposed to do, yeah, it's so freeing and it's so easy. And, mm-hmm. Not that all things are without difficulty, but the suffering isn't so bad, right? And,
right.
And it reminds you of Jesus saying, look, my burden is light and my yoke is easy, come take this, let me carry this with you. And
right.
so when you're doing something that sets your personality and your temperament and your style all in one way, then yeah, it's fun. It's good. Mm-hmm. And then God could show up in ways that mm-hmm. are amazing.
And through that, there just became this willingness that every day I wanted to give back more. When I saw that people were feeling so comfortable and at ease, and people started having voice, like through feeling like they were safe in touch. Mm-hmm. I mean, we would have literally people that were in jail and hadn't been touched, and they just felt calmer. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, when I come out of school, I want to continue with that.
Yeah, this isn't the same thing, but like when I was in Afghanistan, nobody's touching me for mm-hmm. 9 months. Mm-hmm. And I remember going in, and I think it was maybe Istanbul when we got back or something within the deployment. And there was a lady who was cutting our hair, and she was like super gentle with my face and mood. And like, I literally teared up.
I want to tell you a story. Yeah. I love that. And that is exactly it. It is the same, Clint, is that moment where you're gifted a moment of peace and serenity and loved on in a healthy way. Mm-hmm.
It's not sexual. It's not inappropriate. It's, right. It's not forced. It's right. It's just care.
That's right. I had a woman years ago, 20 years ago, and I was shampooing her hair, and she just started weeping. And I was like, do you need a moment? Is there anything I can do for you? And she said, no. She said, you're okay. Just know that I'm finally okay. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, she had not been touched in a manner where she had felt safe since she had been raped as a child. Mm. And there was just this moment where it was just a peaceful moment where when she was with me, she knew there was nothing there to hurt her. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I really think that's one of the gifts, is that most people, when they are with me and they're getting their hair done, is they feel that. They feel this very authentic, I'm here to help you. This isn't about money. This is about helping you. Mm-hmm. So
that's awesome. So tell me the transition. When did you open Avalon and like get to your own salon and all that?
So in school, there was a man named Mark Smith, and he owned a hair salon called Lookers, and it was on Airline Drive in Bossier, and it was like the place in Bossier. I was a Shreveport girl, and this is back in the day where driving over the bridge was a big deal. Yeah. And so I never thought that I would work in Bossier. But come to find out, he was watching students. And so I didn't realize that he was aware of who I was. And so I was sent on an interview under the guise of, you need to learn how to interview. And he really already knew he wanted to hire me because he knew I had a skill to go ahead and come and do men's cutting, which in the world of hair salons, I right now have 4 stylists in training, and men's cuts are what people are most nervous to do. And I had a real strong barber skill of men's cutting. And so I went and was interviewed, and I went to work for Mark, and I was at Lookers for 7 years. And at some point I knew that I wanted to own a salon, and it's based off of the name Avalon. At the time, there was a Christian group called Avalon. There was an album called Avalon by Roxy Music, and then there's the story of the Mists of Avalon.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just loved how all 3 represented a little bit of, I love reading, Roxy Music, the album is so wonderful, chill, and relaxing that it just is my vibe. And then I loved the group Avalon. And so I'm never ashamed to say that there's a little bit of this natural business in me. I mean, I was that kid in the 3rd grade that I was selling candy. So I knew that if I named Avalon Hair Salon, it was going to be first in the phone book under barbershops and beauty salons. And so,
guys, a phone book is it's a yellow thing that's like 40 pounds and has everybody's number in it.
5,000 numbers in it.
I remember taking a picture of Grady, my oldest, like this is like 8 years ago, but we're still getting the phone books, and it came on our porch, and I told him it was a phone book, and he picked it up and put it against his ear, and I took a picture of it.
Yeah.
It's like, man, the world's changed.
So I have a apprentice working with me, and she doesn't know who Rod Stewart is.
Right.
I'll go to reference some. She's like, what? So,
yeah. Oh, I know the other
so
day.
antiquated right now.
Oh, it's crazy. I call, and I always have a little bit of a Southern accent still, and so I'll order pizza, and I'll say, they'll say, what's your name? And I say, Clint. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, Clint. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, Clint, like Clint Eastwood. And the girl's like, I don't know who that is. And I'm like, what? Like, how is this the world we live in? I got to get a new reference.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm as a 55-year-old woman in a hair salon, I'm feeling that every day.
Oh,
it's
man.
a lot.
Okay. So what year was that you opened Avalon?
Oh, 91. I just celebrated 26 years. So I'm like, you do the math. I'm an artist. So
I'm a therapist. So none of Chip would have to do the math because I don't know how to do it.
We're gonna let Chip do it. So not 26 years ago.
That's easy. 26 years. So it's been open for 26 years.
Yes.
And you started with yourself and how many people?
Myself.
Yeah.
Me, myself, and I. My cousin Erin was a student at Magnet High School, and she got out of school and she came and answered the phones for me. I wanted to always have a receptionist.
Where was your first office?
So about a quarter of a mile from where the salon is now in Uri Drive, there was a little building next to Broadmoor Florist. And I was leasing that spot. I did a little business plan. I used LSUS had like a small business group that they would for free help people with business plans for their students, I guess, for their projects. And so I went back to LSU after I went to LSU, for a while, said that earlier. So I went back and they helped me with my business plan. And a guy named Bill Giesland, who was a banker at the time, who now just does skydiving. If anyone here likes to skydive, check out Louisiana Skydive. But Bill and LSUS helped me with my business plan. And I rented this little place, and it was me. And
do you remember what your lease cost was?
Oh yeah, it was $500.
That's crazy.
And like that was just like devastating to me.
I'm sure that was like $1 million.
Like it was like $1 million. And so I had my I am a little OCD in the artistic world, and I had a business plan for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 year. And my true goal was like just get to that 3 year. If I can get to 3 years, then we can, I'll be good. And I recently asked my uncle, he owned a couple of restaurants, and I was like, Uncle Chester, when am I going to stop being nervous about failing? And he said, well, you're not a real entrepreneur if you get to that point. I was like, okay, well, I don't like that, but
I totally,
think that's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Every day I'm like, are you there, God? It's me, Grace Ann.
Are clients
Help
still
me.
going to call?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how successful you are.
I drove up this morning and was just like, oh, okay, it's there. It's beautiful. It's great. The flowers are blooming. But so very long story short, I needed to leave the lease because of some property issues of a shared driveway. I was devastated. I was doing so well. Within 6 months, I had 5 people working with me.
Wow.
I always like to say working with me and not for me, because I'm trying to always teach people to be bigger, better than me, to have a bigger, better, more thriving income than I am. And I believe we're a team. And so 5 people were with me. And so I really did need a larger space. And I quickly had to find a location, and I found the building that I'm in now, and it is the most beautiful location. I've been there for 23 years.
Okay, so that was 3 years in. You switched.
Yeah, I was like
the house now.
2 years in, so 2 years in.
Yeah.
And I purchased that property. My grandparents co-signed the loan for me, and so that's where we've been now for 23 years.
That's crazy. And you have how many people now?
There are 14 employees right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you have it set up where they go through like stages of progression, right?
Yes.
Because it's been really cool. I was telling, I can't remember the girl's name who's one of the new front desk people. Mm-hmm. It's been really cool because, maybe 8 years, might be longer because my kids are 10 and I think I've maybe been coming there longer than they've been alive. Because the way I had gotten my hair cut from all kinds of people. So let's nerd out for a second. I don't have a whole lot of hair to cut these days. But when I had luscious locks, I was always the anxious guy who was like, from my family trauma, I would never tell a hairdresser, hey, please snip that part. Right? I would just sit there and be super anxious and nervous and take what I get and leave. Mm-hmm. And then I would go home and like try to fix it myself because I never wanted to offend my hairdresser.
Hairstylists and customer relationships are some of the most interesting and intense relationships on the planet.
Oh, it's wild. Well, again, there's not many spaces in life that, we've talked about this before too, that, you're talking for that long with somebody while they're touching you, while you're getting something done. That's the most, most prominent thing in our society that you present yourself with.
And for pivotal moments.
Yeah, like I'm about to go to a job interview, I'm getting a wedding, I'm getting married, I'm doing my, baptism, like all these things. So you're right. It's like such an intimate thing. And of course I've been through, and like you have, and everybody listening, the gamut of healthy and unhealthy, just like therapists, just like pastors, just like teachers, just like anybody, people are not, they're either there to do the job or they're there to do what you're saying to do. And those are distinctly different things. But I was working at the children's home, and we were, that little house on the corner? It's right across from you guys.
Yes.
Yep. So I was doing.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
I forgot about that.
So that was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I remember one day I made the decision of like, I'm going to change my hairdresser because I wanted to try something new.
I remember when you came in. Yep. That is crazy.
That's a long time ago. Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember coming in and being like, oh, there's a ton of girls. Like, is this a girly place to go? Like, is this where I'm supposed to be? Maybe I shouldn't be here. And I tried it, and I remember there was like an initial person, and she did fine, but I still was like, I don't care. I'm not going to say what I like.
Yeah.
And, then I think I got Victoria maybe a little bit after that. And then, it's just been interesting in my own life with therapy, the parallel of now with my relationship with her and just in life in general, being able to ask for what I need.
Yes.
And so even though it sounds so silly, it's like the ability for me to say, hey, I don't like that. Or, hey, I know I'm balding, but can you help me with this little patch here?
Right.
And my wife's like, it looks the same literally every time you get it cut. And I'm like, that's what you say about your hair too, right. And so, but anyway, it's just been cool to see my own personal growth over a decade. And even just being able to tell the person cutting my hair, hey, I don't like that. Or, hey, be careful with this. Or, hey, I desire this. And even if you think it's silly and ridiculous because my hair's falling out. Or, hey, let me know when I need to shave my head. Like, don't let me end up being one of those guys who needs to just let it go. So anyway, and then the parallel of like getting to meet you and getting, like my business has been open 8 years now. So getting to see, just looking at what you're doing and how you have booth fees and how you build people's structure has helped me to also kind of think about how I do that with my counselors and, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a really interesting, whether you know it or not, a really interesting like parallel.
Yeah, well, I could see that. I mean, I definitely can see that, how you've grown and how you're trying to help people. And it's still trying to incorporate, this is a company and these are our core values and how do we grow as a team, and it's a lot. I mean, it's just constantly a journey. And when you own your business and you're trying to give back, you have to remind yourself at times that it's you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be right, and it's okay if people don't see the vision, so it's
or have a different vision,
and how do we incorporate sometimes some of that into what you're doing?
Yep. And then how do you say nope, that if you do your thing and we'll do ours. And that's the thing I feel like you've experienced and I've experienced is just you're going to lose people are going to do their own thing, and on some level you just have to be okay with like, hey, I can't take all this personally.
Yes.
God's going to move things and do things, and I can judge it and stress out about it or think it should or shouldn't have happened. And I mean, every time that I have a plan or an agenda, God's plan is always way better.
Right.
And the right people come in after this person. I've had people just move to Texas, no, nothing. And I'm like, man, I really love this person and I need this person. I trust this person. And then somebody even better fitted comes in. And it's like, it's not because they're better than that person. It's just God is doing God's thing.
That's right.
But when Clint or Grace Ann Blake tries to do it, it's like,
boy, howdy.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Boy, howdy.
So recently, right, the big change, is there anything else you want to talk about with Avalon? Like anything that would be...
I want to touch on that when you're working with employees and with people in the public in general, all of your issues, good and bad, are constant in your daily decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, there's going through my childhood of what created who Grace Ann really is was coming out of serious physical and sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to stay aware of caring for myself in the process of caring for people is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And also knowing that I don't have to explain my weaknesses or strengths. And we talked about that earlier, I think before we started the podcast, about strengths and weaknesses, and that it's that you are who you are. And if you're doing things from the right place, really authentically, that's what's important.
Yeah, and will pay off in the long run.
And it will pay off in the long run. And staying true to healthy boundaries, and continually to work on those boundaries.
Yeah.
And knowing that you don't have to be perfect. And so I just wanted to share that.
No, that's good.
Because
that's
working with people, it's in such a close manner, is you're constantly, I find people come without trusting. And so if you're trying to do something pure and good, people don't trust that.
Yep.
And you can say that all day long. You can, and sometimes you just have to say, I need you to, at this point, you don't have to believe it, but I need you to trust this path enough that you're going to stop fighting me, or we might not need to be in a relationship in this manner.
It's good. I mean, I had to learn that lesson the hard way over the last 10 years. And I probably said this on the podcast before, but it's worth repeating over and over again. But I thought, coming from a trauma background and a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser, and trauma survivor, and, all those things, that whether it's the Army or family or whatever, or sexual trauma, the deep shame of like, I'm not enough and I can't be authentic to who I am, because who I am, there's something wrong with it. And I need everybody to understand who I am and my intentions and why I'm doing everything, because it all comes from a good place. Like, that's what my thought process was. The freedom was realizing, well, not everything, I'm not God, and my intentions are not always good. And it's only God in me that's working for his good in me that can be glorified and magnified, was super freeing. But then the realization of like, I remember having this conversation with it was either a pastor or my therapist or both. And I was like, I'm trying to be loving. I'm trying to be giving. I'm trying to be sacrificial. And people just crap on you. And I remember they looked at me and they were I was like, what? And they were like, well, how'd that go for Jesus? And I was like, oh man, yeah, Jesus was perfect. He was loving. He was compassionate. He was the most authentic thing there could have been. And they didn't believe him and they killed him. Mm-hmm. And so there are going to be times with employees and friends and family and yourself where you are genuine. You are trying to do the right thing. And with all your strength and prayer and might, you're trying to help everybody. And there are people who aren't going to see that.
So I'm at a real pivotal point in life, and we'll transition with this, is that I'm now Caddo Parish Commissioner. Mm-hmm. So I did...
Congratulations.
Thank you. Did something very political. I have always wanted to be a part of community. Uh-huh. And so this is a dream come true. It also is coming at a time when I'm able to trust other people to help me in my business. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard. And I just had that exact conversation that you just shared with my business consultant and or coach. She's like a business coach in the beauty world. And she was like, this isn't about you. Right, Grayson? This is about your team. Mm-hmm. I was like, ooh, okay, but I want people to like me. And she's like,
they're not going to.
They're not going, like this, that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But it was exactly that conversation. So I'm glad that you kind of just gave me that little converation again.
Well, praise God. I mean, we need perfect. It. We need to be reminded. And before we were on here, we were talking a little politics, and there are people that are good people that are in politics, and half the country hates them on one side or the other. And it's just crazy to go, like that. That is a wild world to live in. If you think you're going to be able to get anything done to help the majority, and everybody's going to like you, That's not the world we live in.
It is not the world we live in.
So how did you, decide to do Caddo Commissioner, and how did that go about? The short, the
short story.
We got time, but I just want to hear it.
I fell in love, like I said, when I was in high school, a freshman in civics for enterprise. Ms. Pouncey was my teacher, and so I've always been very keenly aware of what's going on from that moment on, of understanding the branches of government. And then this is what free enterprise looks like. And this is what capitalism looks like. And how do the two coexist? I have many people in my family have owned businesses. And so I've been very, I think, business driven. And I bought a house very young. And my first interaction was, it was a house that was built outside of the city limits. And I was so young, I didn't realize it. We didn't have sidewalks in the neighborhood. And I was like, well, why did we not have sidewalks? Now, this is an antiquated moment. We didn't have computers in a home. I mean, nobody on the planet did.
Right.
At this time. And
back in the olden days.
This is back in the olden days. And I didn't know how to get in touch with anybody. And so our city council were at St. Vincent Mall meeting constituents. And I went to make a complaint that I didn't have a sidewalk in a neighborhood. And I just remember this person looking up at me and going, what do you want us to do? You don't even live in the city. And I was like, what do you mean? And it was a neighborhood off of Flora Lucas. Mm-hmm. And so I got a little quick lesson on parish and city and what they could and couldn't do. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And went knocking on every door in this little neighborhood to see if we could somehow collectively get funds together to do a sidewalk. That did not happen. But that was kind of like this, how do I help do something that needs to be done? Because older people were falling on this street and
kids riding
kids are riding bikes. And so fast forward, life happens. I become a mom, I own a business, I'm involved. I start helping out with other people's political campaigns of getting information and doing things like knocking on doors, being involved. What can I do to help you? I was always that person that if you're running for mayor, I want to know everyone running for mayor so I could make the right choice. So I was kind of like in the background doing things and listening to people and going to civic events. I also, as my business grew, I was going to functions because I wanted to know what was happening in my community so I could grow my company better.
Mm-hmm.
I understood demographics really well. And so I was always like, what's happening with growth? What's going on with the base? What, units coming in and out? What are the schools doing? Is there a school that's growing so I can reach to the teacher? So I was really for business reaching out and also being just a person who cared about the community.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Broadmoor from the time I was a very young adult, and my salon is on Uri Drive in the Broadmoor area. I joined the Broadmoor Neighborhood Association when I was very young, and I've been a member off and on my whole adult life. And so I just was active in that manner. When COVID happened, my industry was shut down for 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really hard time. And I believe in less government. And when there was a lot of government overreach, or what I believe to be governmental overreach, I had great concern. But we also needed the government to help us because now we don't have income.
Mm-hmm.
In my whole salon, everyone's an employee.
Right.
So they qualified for unemployment,
Mm-hmm.
which was something I was like, you never want to be on unemployment.
Yeah.
But if we don't have a job, then we need to be on unemployment. So there's all this stuff that I had to learn really quickly that really went against my belief systems.
Yeah.
While trying to make sure people felt like they were safe, while we knew people were really actively sick. So how did we handle that? And so I was navigating things like lightning speed, just warp speed coming at me of make sure people have income, make sure people are well, make sure that I'm not upsetting Caddo Parish, who was setting guidelines. And my salon was inspected 3 different times. We passed with flying colors because you've been coming for 10 years. So it's probably one of the cleanest salons that I know. Like so we were already working with best practices. Like I could have written the handbook on what we should do.
Yeah.
And so then we had to deal with 50% of the world wanting to follow very strict rules, and 50% were like, what rules? And so there's all this stuff happening. And I was like, I'm an old woman and I'm tired of everybody coming at me.
I remember. Yeah, very similar. I'm like, we're doing Zoom with everybody. It's like, you can't Zoom a haircut.
I'm literally like Zooming my team, and I'm that old person like screaming in, and it was horrible.
They're like, you're muted.
They're still like, Grace Ann, it was such a terrible, crazy, hard time. But so many beautiful things actually happened.
Yep.
One is I learned to shift. I've always been somebody who acclimated pretty well. Life's short. I'm going to figure it out.
I mean, you had that survival skill, right? It's like all of our trauma and suffering, if shaped by God, can turn into something beautiful.
I say all the time, I feel so blessed. I am truly grateful and thankful for all of the crazy things that happened to me, because it shaped me into who I am, and it's made me capable.
Mm-hmm.
My father, to just touch on that, 17 years ago, he asked for forgiveness in a setting. It might have been 15, actually. Between 17 and... No. It had to be 17. Sorry. 17 years ago, he asked for forgiveness. And it was in front of some family in California in a moment that I was not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I turned to him. I was walking out of my aunt's house, and I just said, Dad, I need you to know you don't really need forgiveness from me, because what happened made me who I am. So how about I'm grateful, and so I'm well with my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, I guess like 6 months ago, sent him a text that said, I just want to let you know, I do forgive you, and I hope that you're okay. And we've done some texting and a little bit of Facebook connection in a very safe manner for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very good with keeping myself safe.
Well, praise God for that.
Yes. And so all of the trauma in life happenings, to me, I recognized really young, and especially through when I started my path of therapy, that these were blessings. They weren't scars to be ashamed of. That these were scars that I could help people with, and I could help myself with. And so kind of went off on that tangent, but
no, that's great. I mean, it's the same thing for me, right? Like I was meeting with some employees this morning, and we were talking about leadership and vulnerability, and lots of people that I work with, they've been in churches, they work for pastors, they've worked for other employees, and being a leader who is open and vulnerable and shares in your failings and works and goes, I call you guys coworkers. It's just a different environment, right. And so I was thinking to myself this morning, God was like, your imperfections still, and your still struggles, and you're still needing to grow. Those things help your employees, because who wants a boss who pretends to be perfect all the time?
Right.
Like who wants that's not authentic. Like having somebody who always presents as like this perfect Christian man or woman who has all the answers and who's done it all. Like, I don't want that. I got Jesus for that. Like
100%. And when I hire people, I let them know, listen, I am ADD. I'm cuckoo. Sometimes I'm a cussing Christian. I'm going to try to go somewhere way away to do that. Like, I'm human. Yep. And I try to let people know I'm trying to authentically do what's right, but I am a human. So I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm
let me be human.
Right. I'm trying to do things in such a manner that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then back to where I'm at now with being on the Caddo Parish Commission,
So you were like, we need sidewalks, and then you...
Right. So at that point, I was like, I'm mad, right? I became very mad. I was like, who are these people setting up these rules? And I'm watching everyone on Zoom, and I saw somebody, I don't know if I should say this story, but I saw somebody not bow their head when they were praying. And I am very shy when I pray. And so every time I pray in front of people in the commission, it is one of the hardest moments for me. That is a very private thing to me. But I remember seeing this person not bow their head, and they just stared while there was prayer going on. And I don't know what was going on. I don't think the person was intentionally being irreverent. But I just remember thinking, I want that person to bow their head. And I thought, well, don't judge somebody unless you're willing to try to do something like that person. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that now I'm up there, and I was asked to say a prayer at the opening work session on Monday. And that's just a moment where I just hope that for 30 seconds, something comes through me that helps somebody, because it's a really important private moment that is, you're asking God to do something. So, but I became angry and concerned about the direction of what was happening to businesses and people, and seeing the amount of hurt. I mean, when you have 14 people, pre-COVID, I had 19 employees. I had 5 people that had left right before COVID. So I was with 14 coming back from COVID, and trying to care for that many people, and hearing the stories of sadness, anger, hurt, and happiness at the same time that you're getting to see people again, and hearing true stories of my aunt passed away, or I thought I was going to pass away. These stories you would hear all day. I wanted to make sure that there was a better direction in the future. And I was concerned about not having a voice. And so that sparked it. There was some things in my district that at the time I didn't see getting taken care of. And so I was like, I want someone to take care of the grass not being cut, the roads, all the things that I'm dealing with now. Mm-hmm. And so it's, you become humbled real quick, and you understand real quick what you can and can't do. And you see what people are trying to do. Mm-hmm. So through a really hard, challenging time, I was like, it's time for me. I'm at a point where I can step away. I have some time. I think, the mental space to focus and to do that. And there's so much that you have to step away for events. This morning, there was a grand reopening for a grocery store in my district. I was at a legislative breakfast yesterday. I mean, there's stuff you're doing every day that no one ever sees or knows about. They just think you're 2 or 3 times a month
having meetings.
Yeah. And you're literally doing, probably 20, 30 hours a week of time of focusing on Caddo Parish work or stuff that will help your district. So that was where it began. Was I was frustrated through the COVID time of choices being made and not having a voice, and wanting to make sure that I have a voice to help people. And I've believed in helping literally one head at a time to have a beautiful experience. And for me, this is now it's like one person at a time in Caddo Parish that I can help. If I can help in one aspect to make a difference, that's what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome.
So I called a friend of mine, Grayson Butcher, and I said, I want to run. And he goes, his wife's name Heather. Heather and I were just talking about you, that you really need to do something in our community. And he said, call Alan Seabaugh. And I said, yeah, I'll call Alan. I'm, super good friends with Alan and Laura Seabaugh. And Alan said, great. It's great to see somebody that wants to do something in this community. And so we talked about that and what that looks like and what does it mean to be involved in the community as an elected official. And then Laura Seabaugh was this great person in my life who was like, you need to be prayerful about this. You need to think, really get quiet about this. This is going to be the hardest thing you're going to ever do. It can be the most incredible thing you ever do, but you have to really understand what that looks like. And so she was this great person in my life through this, that to this day I can send her a text or a phone call. Hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you talk with me? Mm-hmm. Can you just having a voice of somebody who, because she's been around it so long, she understands a lot, and she has a woman's voice, and I think that's important that I have a woman's voice to help me in that process.
Yeah,
because there's very still few women. I just found out that I'm the 7th woman that has been in the position of a commission, on the commission in Caddo Parish, and that's crazy to me that it's 2024. So
that's awesome. Well, I'm proud. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
It's really cool to hear, and I know there's lots more details to your story than what you're sharing in an hour, but it's really cool for people. People who listen to podcasts, they're always looking for hope and encouragement, and there's lots of people that are out there that are entrepreneurs, that are starting out their life, who've been through trauma. I mean, just the gamut of both of our stories that are very similar. And growing up in divorced families and experiencing trauma and abuse, and then, being entrepreneurial and figuring out how to get out of all that. You skip the Army, but, the reality is.
I almost joined the Air Force.
That's right. You're doing it now. You're on the other side, right? I did the Army first, and you're doing the Army now, basically with Caddo Commissioner. Yeah, but I mean, the point is that it's really cool to encourage people that are listening to go, man, you can be whatever you want to be. Like, 100%. You don't have to be tied down by your trauma or your baggage or your gender.
Right. Or learning issues.
Yeah.
I mean, I just spoke to a Girl Scout group, and there was a young lady, when she heard my story, she said, so you had an issue, and it's called a learning challenge now, and I'm learning all the new language. Yeah. And I said, I did. And she said, well, what do you think, how can you help people in what you're doing that have learning challenges? And I was like, wow, here's this young soul who's already caring about people to make sure that they have an opportunity to do whatever they want to do. Mm-hmm. And so, I said, the way that I can help is to talk about it and to answer questions and to help encourage other people to know, don't judge people, but find out what it is that people want to do and how can you help them in that process, no matter what the challenge is, mm-hmm. whether it be that you come from a family that is of abuse, or financial problems, or learning issues, whatever, that we can overcome challenges.
Absolutely.
By finding out what the needs are and then saying, what can I do to help?
Yep.
You know,
we don't get very political on the podcast. Well, really never, because I'm a pretty moderate person. But I'm interested as a female. You know, we just had the election last night. Trump won. How do you, in your mind, you know, because you're a business owner, you're now a commissioner, you know, you're steeped in the community, you've been through trauma, like your story paints itself to where, you know, maybe I'm reaching, but it's like would typically lean you towards like Democratic, right? In the world of like politics and Fox
right.
and
This
CNN.
is such a great topic for me because this is where it's not to me political, and I say everything is political.
Sure.
What we decide to wear is political. We're making a judgment, and
Right.
that's what political turns into, as a judgment and what's right and wrong.
So can you give me just the 5-10 minute like
the 5-10 minute, because it's huge and it's very important.
Yeah. I'm just interested.
Okay. So I come from a family, and I was a registered independent until a few years ago. But I have identified as a conservative before I even knew that it was conservative. And that I recognized that I was a Republican in high school. But growing up with a family that half of the people were Democrats and half were Republicans, and all the people were doing service work, either through social work or law enforcement or military and teachers. I was like, both sides of the political of Democrat and Republican are wonderful people. So I don't ever sit in that like it's a Democrat Republican thing. For me, it is about income. As women in society, we are taught to make less than to get help. So for me, I'm fighting against, if I have a woman that's in need for any help through a life crisis issue where she might need help through a government organization, if you make a certain amount, you qualify. If you make more than a certain amount, you no longer qualify.
Right.
So for me, this is about let me make as much income as I can to take care of myself, so I'm not having to rely on a government to then tell me what I can and can't receive. My mom, as a profession, was a counselor for displaced homemakers. So I was a kid that would sit under her desk while she was teaching women how to dress, how to present themselves on job interviews so they could get a good paying job. And so I was always hearing these stories, and the women didn't know I was hiding under this little metal desk, like coloring while my mom was teaching classes, because she was a mom who was living this life like that she was struggling while married and didn't have help. And so then as a teenager, my mom was helping women in programs, and I would babysit a lot of the women in the programs. I would babysit for the women, and I would see the struggles they were going through. And I would also see at times how programs were being used and misused. And so I saw things in a very unique light. And I was, at a very young age, I understood that our taxes, the money we were earning, was paying for programs. And my mom was always fighting for funding for programs. And I would ask her, well, if we don't have people coming off of the program, how is that helping? And if we don't have enough funds for the right programs, how is that helping? And so for me, it became a very true awareness that I financially don't want to be held back by a government or another person, that I want to protect myself through income. So that's where it stems from. Is for me, the government is a control when you have people that are reliant and we don't have an out. So if you ever hear me talk about things in the commission, you hear me talk about, yes, we have needs. How do we properly fund programs to help people, but then how do we help people shift off of the programs so they're functioning?
Right. So if the program's actually working, it's helping them not to be dependent on the program.
Not to be dependent. And unfortunately, we have, in my view, a party that doesn't have the right answers to help people to become self-sufficient and sustainable on their own. The party that I am, that I feel like is helping people to not be reliant, but to help. So it's for me, it's about income.
Yeah, I just think
and having a heart and finding the balance. And so,
well, I just think it's interesting, and I wanted to give you a voice a little bit. One, as a woman, but also as a Republican woman.
Yeah.
Where I think so many times, I mean, the media is 17-1 liberal to conservative in some ways.
Well, and I think that society has gone so far out of common sense, healthy boundaries. And I'm looking for things that really
make sense.
And that are, am I allowed to say anything political?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I was
whatever.
very fortunate to go to the Republican convention as an alternate delegate.
Yeah.
And I have said for 4 solid years, I just want some common sense. And people are like, oh, common sense isn't so common. And I'm like, well, it really should be. And it's okay to be healthy and to make common sense decisions. I mean, as a business person, there's rights and wrongs. There's numbers matter. You have to follow policy and procedure. Guidelines need consistency. So when I went to the convention, they have signs that you get to hold up. And there was a sign that said common sense. Bring back common sense. And I was like, this is my party. This is my party. So I am a believer in common sense, helping others with boundaries, being fiscally responsible, which is really hard as a business owner. I know how hard it is and the struggle. But I think that we should always help people, but help get people past the situation, not keep people in a situation.
Yeah.
So
that's good. I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's important for people to hear, from a female and a Republican, especially in this season where, a female didn't get elected and people are, and I have a lot of empathy with that. I have a lot of empathy for people who, had some hopes and some dreams and wanted to see a woman elected and all those kind of things.
I think, though, in life, hopes and dreams do matter, but things have to make sense. And so I don't want to ever assume somebody can do something because they're a man or they're a woman or they're old or they're young. I want there to be really a track record. And I want there to be, when people come to Avalon to work, I have the capability to saying, we have been in business for 26 years, and I have a track record of helping people create a beautiful income that's sustainable and thriving. When I opened Avalon, I couldn't say I had Avalon for 26 years, but what I could say was, I am a hairstylist of 7 years who have done the right things, and I can teach you the practices that work to help you to have that income. So I opened Avalon 7 years after making sure that I could do that. Now, every day I'm working hard. I am in the trenches, and it's not easy. And I'll tell you right now, with our economic climate, I'm like, are you there, God? I'm Grace Ann. Please help me. I'm doing what I can do. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I'm still using faith. I'm still using my best practices. I mean, I was up super early after watching all the political stuff, and I've already done some hair today. I've done a grand opening. I mean, I'm doing those best practices still, right? And so I forgot what I said.
Well, you were just talking about the importance of having a track record.
Oh, having a track record. So for me, I was a woman who, I'd love to see a woman president. Do I think a woman can do it? Yeah. When I was running for my elected office, I had somebody say something about me being a woman and a hairstylist. She doesn't know what she's doing. She can't handle this. And I was like, I'm a woman
Yeah.
who has birthed 2 children, who has a successful company,
Who has survived a lot.
has survived a lot. I wake up and I'm taking care of the house and myself and others, and still have time to plant pretty flowers. Watch me. So I believe a woman can be
You go,
president,
girl.
right?
You go,
Like,
girl.
don't get me on my women empowerment. I believe a woman definitely could fill the role as a president, but I think we need to have the right person, the right time, the right season. And so for me, I did not feel strong about what was happening. I didn't have that empathy for people that felt like they needed a woman. It's like, no, I want the right person. I mean, I just spoke with somebody about they're interested in running for office, and we had a conversation, and it's a woman, and we had a conversation, and I said to her some thoughts about from a woman place, and then I had to go back and send a text and say, just actually go back and just pray about it, because is this the right time?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we have to make sure that we're making decisions. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it's good.
Is this right?
Not emotionally driven.
And I'll end with this. Doing the right thing is the hardest thing you're ever going to do. And understanding what is right sometimes is the hardest thing, because there's so much stuff being thrown at you that you're having to duck and weave and go, what's the truth? And I think we just saw a season of what's the truth. And I think a lot of people came out and said, I'm ready for the truth. And so that's what I'm looking for in the future, is the truth. And every day I'm trying to live a true, authentic life as a female business owner who's a sometimes cussing Christian.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so thankful for you to come and talk and share your story. And I know it's going to be super encouraging to a lot of people. I mean, it's just encouraging to me today just to look at my own life and look at our business and what we do. And I was meeting with somebody earlier this morning talking about the same thing. Okay, I've got 10 good things. Which one are God things? What are the things that we need to be doing versus the things that, just are good? I was in the prison last week meeting with a bunch of inmates, and they were begging me to come back and saying, hey, we only have 2 counselors. And I'm like, okay, who do I need to call to get support? How can I get funding to get our therapist? My brain goes a million different ways, as I'm sure you do as a business owner.
Yes.
But then you have to go, okay, what's reality and what can you do?
Yes.
Let's pray about this. Let's figure out is that your role? Is it not? And all that.
I like to say something, because one of the most curious things that has happened through this being a Caddo Parish Commissioner, there has been my abuse has been at this point like a full circle moment where I'm working with people that a year ago I would have told you there's no way. I wouldn't even be able to talk to somebody that has hurt people in the manner that they have. God's a pretty powerful entity of taking something very horrible and helping to do good. Mm-hmm. And so I'm pretty grateful for the place that I'm in right now. And I am, because of losing my mom, what I got out of that was this: we're given just this moment, really just this second. And in this moment, I feel so blessed to have experienced knowing that God is so big and powerful that everything that happens to us is for good.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he's working it out for good, that's for sure. And he's working it out in you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm thankful for you to do what you're doing. So thanks for coming on. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. God bless you guys and have a good week.